Hello, welcome to Community Matters. This is your host, Becky Steinbrunner, and I'm honored to be here with you for the next 2 hours. Happy Halloween! We have a very good show lined up for you today, and I hope that you will stay on to listen and call in to participate. This is Community Matters, and it does matter, and it matters especially when you participate in this show and in the community. Our program for today will be focused mostly on the battery energy storage system, or BESS, issue going on in Santa Cruz County, but also Monterey County. And we are honored at 2:15. Our call-in guest will be 2nd District County Supervisor Glenn Church, who on Tuesday asked the Monterey County Board of Supervisors to enact what was called a referral of a battery energy storage system, or BESS, moratorium until the County of Monterey can come up with a set of laws that will pertain to battery energy storage systems. They don't have any rules right now. I am realizing I need to set up the equipment so that he can call in, and so you'll have to bear with me here for a little bit. He'll be calling in at 2:15, so you're going to hear some odd things, and my apologies. I was rather nervous here getting ready for this show, and I neglected to do that, so you're going to hear some things. Here
You
we
are
go.
connected as the host. Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the call-in studio web interface. Audio recording is on. Dual channel.
All right. We now have our telephone system connected so that 2nd District County Supervisor Glenn Church can call in at about 2:15. And you can call in later. I'd like to hold the calls a little bit while he is on. He only has 15 minutes of his time today to give to us, and I'm very grateful for that. He's one busy guy. So he'll be on from 2:15 until 2:30. And then we'll have Miss Nina Audino.
I need to deal with as a county supervisor, and as I think it was for everybody when this fire took place, we had a considerable learning experience about BESS facilities, or they're really known as battery energy storage systems. And with the fire that happened there, I have spent a considerable amount of time researching and talking to other officials, not just in the state, but my staff has also looked at what has been done at the local level across the country, and there's been actually very little done because this is a relatively new technology in use this way. And as things have progressed since the incident in January, I've seen where there's some shortfalls in the state, things the county could do better, other local agencies could do, and in terms of taking a more proactive instead of a reactive role. So what I have done is I've introduced what we call here from the Board of Supervisors of Monterey County is a referral, which is basically introducing a request for an ordinance to be developed. And so there's two parts to this. One, and the long-term most important, is that the county start to redraft an ordinance that will deal with these BESS facilities as they appear, and also application.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 2 applications that are out at my understanding at this time, and things do change, so I could be off on something, but I believe there's only 2, and that is both Vistra and PG&E have both submitted prior to the fire plans to expand, but both of those are on hold right now. They've been suspended, and they don't have, from my discussions with them, any plans to go ahead at this time because, well, one reason is that neither one has their facilities that are currently there operating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, It certainly is a mess. I am just so sorry that it happened. Isn't that just the worst? What can you tell us? And I know that the EPA has not been real forthcoming, but can you tell us just an update about what is happening at the Moss Landing Moss 300 Vistra fire site? What is happening there?
Yes, I don't have a current update. I should be getting one any time from EPA. Of course, the EPA is the federal government. They, march to their own drum, and they're basically working this out with Vistra on the cleanup. Obviously, there is some involvement from the county and local agencies like our local fire, who are aware of what is, things develop and go on at times. But I know the big challenge that they had is that if you look at pictures of where this fire happened, obviously about half the facility, 2/3 of the facility burned. So there were about a third of the batteries, or 40% of the batteries, that were unburned. They had to have those disconnected and haul those out, and they were going to somewhere to be recycled up in Reno or somewhere in Nevada, I believe. I believe it was up in the Reno area. So that was being removed from there.